Well, first of all, can we be clear what happiness is, right? So
Yeah.
we hear the term used a lot. In fact, we've used it for about 2,500 years, and I don't expect to be able to solve that puzzle now. But I can give you a pretty good, useful guide for how we might solve it. And that is to pay attention to the experiences that we have day to day, moment to moment. And I think we have two sets of nice experiences, things that make us feel happy. We have things that feel fun, and we have things that feel fulfilling. Pleasure and purpose. And I think that happy lives are ones that have the right balance that works for that individual of those twin things, of those twin sets of activities, pleasurable ones and purposeful ones.
You call it the pleasure-purpose principle, don't you? And it's like a swingometer between the two, getting somewhere in the middle to get the ultimate benefit, I suppose, in terms of happiness. Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, some of us will have experiences where we are having lots of fun. I mean, quite a lot of our academic insights come from personal experience, and then we try and find evidence that, shows we're right and sometimes proves we're wrong. And I come from a working class background where people had lots of fun. They lived for the weekend and didn't have much purpose in their lives. And then I work at institutions like the LSE, and the swingometers at the other end. People have lots of purpose but not much fun. And I think you could probably take best bits of each of those worlds and make them into the perfect pleasure purpose principle. So it's about finding the right sets of activities that work for you. I don't want to, whilst I think that everyone needs the right balance and that's for each individual to work out, I don't want to tell you what things you should find fun and which things you should find fulfilling. That's for each individual to kind of, find out for themselves.
Sarah's got the advantage over me because she's got a copy of your book, Happiness by Design, in front of her. So I haven't been able to figure out what you mean by design.
Yeah.
Happiness is what you make it.
Yeah, so the behavioural sciences have taught us over the last decade or two that most of what we do simply comes about rather than being thought about. You're making about 10,000 decisions every day. Most of those are done automatically and largely by, kind of habit, because that's what you've always done, right? If you actively had to think about every single decision you made, then your head would explode. So your brain likes to conserve attention or energy. And so it's why sometimes you'll check whether you've turned the oven off, locked the house. When you think about consciously whether you've acted in that way, you actually don't know because it was done done by this kind of autopilot. Mm-hmm. So happiness by design is then getting you to step back for a moment, think about how you can design your environments, organise your life, plan your days in all the ways that make it easier for you to then do the things that make you feel good and not the things that make you feel bad, without then having to think too hard about it. Because if you read any of the sort of self-help genre, they'll say change the way you think, be positive. Well, yeah, I kind of worked that out, but how do I actually do that? And then, of course, you don't know how to do it, and you rush out and buy the next self-help book. And I'm hoping that mine is the self-help book to end all self-help books.
I was going to say.
On the basis that it's not a self-help book, because you can organise your life. Think about, it's a bit like that dog Patch that Mark has or not has, whichever. I'm not sure how that works. And you sort of think about how you would organise the park in ways that lets the dog run around freely, bouncing around, doing things that make it feel good and not those that make it feel bad. And then you let the dog off the lead, and the dog runs around and just is, kind of happy without having to think too hard about it.
You can't have it both ways. If you're trying to help people, it's a self-help book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or is it the philosophy book? Because by the third line, I've managed to snatch the copy off Sarah. By the third line,
buy your own copy.
I might do later on, because by the third line, you've mentioned the dreaded A word. You know what I mean? The third line, the dreaded A word.
What's the A word?
The A word is Aristotle.
Aristotle? Yeah.
And what you don't mention is in the Nicomachean Ethics, at the very beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics, when he's trying to define what happiness is, he's suggesting that only somebody that created you could define happiness, the same way as somebody who creates a chair or a table can tell you whether that's a good table and it's a content table because they know what they're trying to create. But you don't mention God at all in this.
I don't mention God at all in this. I think we've moved on a little bit in 2,500 years, but I think One of the things that's interesting, actually, from evidence is that people of faith generally report feeling happier than those that aren't. Of course, you can't make yourself happier by having faith. So I think it's sort of there's things for people to work out there for themselves. But I think that happiness, as I say, we're not going to answer all of these puzzles in one 5-minute conversation. But I think that what people need to do more of than we are at the moment, I think, is pay more attention to our experiences, the things that we do day to day, moment to moment, and less attention to the stories that we tell about the things that we think should make us happy. Because I think too many people live too much of the time in these narratives I've got to get the right job, live in the right house, have the right partner that ticks the boxes that I think will make me happy. But actually, day to day, those things might not be what actually do.
And Paul, one of the very interesting things for me was your discourse about children and having children.
Yes.
And as somebody who's recently just had one and has been told for the last year of having one and all during my pregnancy, you'll never be happier. It'll be the best thing that ever happened to you, blah, blah, blah. And I am very happy, but I was happy before as well. It's not like it's transformed my life. And I love what you're saying in the book is that children actually, in your opinion, or in the opinion of surveys that have been done, have a neutral effect on happiness.
Yeah, so can I just say that this isn't what I think. This is what
studies
thousands.
say.
Yeah. So this is based on evidence. So this is based on what sometimes tens of thousands of people say. And I mean, children are a great example of things that we think about making us happy when we think how happy those things make us. Because when I think about my kids, I think about my kids smiling and laughing and joking. So how could my kids not make me happy? Well, of course, sometimes in the experiences with my children, they bring misery and anxiety and worry and stress. And so it's not surprising that most of the data, until I started talking about purpose as an experience in the moment, most of the evidence to that point has said that the sort of joys that children bring are just about offset by the anxiety, worry and stress that they also bring. But I think that what children do, and I'm hoping you're finding this too, although you might not find it in the first year, you might have to wait a few years, is that they bring you experiences of things that you find meaningful, worthwhile, purposeful. When I'm reading to my kids or when the kids are reading the same story again to me, there are other things that I could be doing that would be more fun, but it does feel fulfilling. So that's that pleasure-purpose principle balance again. I'm
just madly in love with him at the moment.
So that's fantastic.
So that's what happens in the first year, I think,
it gets even more madly in love as they grow older, I'm sure.
So what do you think about this idea then, Dolan, as a dad, the idea of that the children possibly only have a neutral impact on your happiness?
No, they bring in purpose, though, remember? Purpose.
Bring in purpose.
No, but I accept the neutral part because it's embarrassing to admit that the greatest joy that I've had in the last 3 months, and one of our listeners, Paul, is pointing this out, the greatest joy I've had in the last 3 months came on Saturday, and it was 3 points and 3 goals to the Addicts. We haven't had that much joy in a long time. Not even my daughters have brought me that much joy. But he doesn't want to wait every 3 months for it. But I tell you, it was worth the wait, I can tell you that.
Just briefly before we let you go, Paul, you overcame, and nobody would know this listening to you, you overcame a stammer with almost...
That's happened to me.
Did you?
No, let's hear your story, really.
You decided you weren't going to pay it as much attention, Paul.
Yeah, it's about attention. Well, yeah, so I'm going to start stammering now, aren't I? That's bound to happen because you primed me to do that. But one of the things that I did was to stop paying attention to it, stop paying attention to whether I spoke fluently or not, and paid more attention to whether people actually understood what I was saying. And it recasts it, because sometimes now I do stammer, but it's okay. As long as I get over what I'm trying to say, then it doesn't matter. I used to count up the number of times I was stammering, or I stumbled over a word and I'd be anxious about it. It would make things worse, and then I'd get even more anxious. And I think people were thinking I was an idiot because I can't get the words out. And it just became worse and worse and worse. So in the end, I stopped paying attention to it. It wasn't as easy and as effortless as that, but that in as short a time as I can answer that question is the answer to it, I think.
I honestly wasn't trying to trump that at all. As a stammerer, you've been through this. You meet somebody else who's a stammerer and isn't stammering anymore, and you say, "Oh, that's just what happened to me." And honestly, as a schoolboy, I stammered really badly.
Really?
And this is you're going to think I'm making this up, but I'm not. My father said to me, Aristotle used to stammer, and how he got himself out of his stammer was to walk around with pebbles in his mouth. And he said, you don't have to do that because you might lose your life, but go around saying, I will not stammer, I will not stammer, I will not stammer. And after years of being taunted at school, I stopped stammering. That's a true story. That is an absolutely true story.
Paul, thanks very much for being with us, meeting fellow
Thank you
stammerer.
both so much. I feel like I've got a stammering bonding session going on
Dude,
now. It's
Paul
just brilliant.
Dolan, I feel better for that. Much better. I'll probably stammer tomorrow, though, Sarah.
I don't think you will.
I think I will.
Too much of a pro. Happiness by
will.
Design by Paul Dolan is
unbelievable.